Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for having me here, Lisa. And it's really fantastic to be in the center here and this new space which has just been designed. What I'm going to be talking about this evening, besides some of the work that we've been doing within artificial intelligence and computational creativity, is how space provides information and how these are interpreted by artists and works. So space is information rich. So the objects, the entities, and the events that occur in these spaces all provide and generate narratives or stories. And borrowing the model from communication, and this is in part from Barry Truax, there's the environment that occurs, these events, and there's the receiver who interprets them and then might have an effect on the environment. So as an example, comic here, where we have the information provided through the graphics and the text, and we interpret those as a narrative, and it's given to us fairly plainly. This is a photograph here. So with photography, it's a real space rather than a purely created one, but the viewer is invited to draw the narrative from it, to create the kinds of stories that the photographer might present within that image. So similarly, real spaces, actually I would actually prefer to call them physical spaces at this point, provide for us layers of information, layers of meaning through events, histories, the different kinds of occurrences which have happened over time. And one of the ways that we're able to communicate information through space is through sound design or sound sculpture. So a number of artists have responded to this. So artists like David Chesworth and Ros Bant and the Canadian Adventures Through Sound Art have all had a look at creating narratives that reference parts of history and events and the cultures that occur in these spaces and bring them to the foreground. So one of the events and creatures and behaviors that I find particularly endearing is the Australian magpie here. So these animals, they congregate in groups. They have very rich and dynamic interactions and hierarchies and a number of different kinds of behaviors which we can observe. So these are a number of their behaviors, such as flocking, foraging, caching, and they all have functions and skills that are involved with them. So by modeling these behaviors, in this one case, we're able to create an AI system and engender these non-articulated sounding robots with the behaviors of the Australian magpie. And so they would communicate with each other and also sense the environment around them, and also be able to sense when somebody was getting close and have these different sorts of behaviors. Another sort of, another creature which I found particularly engaging was the Australian sugar ant. And so again, they have a complex set of interactions and behaviors in the environment, and they create their own sorts of communal groups by reacting to various stimulus in the environment. And so having a look at the behaviors here and modeling those within the computer, it was possible to get these quite dynamic and complex types of interactions and thereby drawings. And so one thing that we did was to put them into 3D space where they would make sounds in the environment, and then in turn be able to create a poetry whenever they interacted. So more recently, as a part of locomotor art with Wynne Palmer and Laura Lee Coles, I created this other model here which blurs the communication channels. So no longer was communication done through electronic or software means, but the language that these boxes tried to evolve over time was based on how they would respond to each other within the space, thereby forming a kind of group language over time to communicate not only their kinds of behaviors, but also the state of their environment. So, warning when somebody was getting close to the tree. So that's the kind of behavior and the stories that we can draw out of entities and the animals in our environment. But the environments themselves also contain stories, different layers of history. And so we have the real space, we have the the story space, and then artists can respond to those histories, thereby creating a story of a story which then feeds back into the space again. And so one way that we communicate the idea about stories is through language, like we tell fibs, tall tales, stories, narratives, fictions, whatever have you not. So we had developed a system that allowed people, users, to be able to input their thoughts, memories into the computer, and for that to create audio representations. So this case is in Queen Elizabeth Park, where the environment there has changed over time from being a quarry and industrial zone to being a point of recreation where people would, behaviors were sort of based towards play. This is Tatlow Park in Vancouver, the oldest park in Vancouver. And these are manufactured landscapes. These are made for people's enjoyment, for their recreation and play. And one of the components that was missing out of this environment was the wildlife, the creatures, especially the frogs. So to modify this space, to manicure it some more, we inserted the sounds of frogs down through the river here. And so in summary, spaces are information rich with different kinds of memories and histories. And it's how we can bring these into the foreground that can produce some very interesting points of dialogue. So thank you.